September 1985, a joint French-US expedition led by Jean-Louis Michel and Dr. Robert Ballard has located, at last, the broken wreck of history's most famous ship. Titanic lies close to 4 kilometres, over 12,000 feet, deep at the bottom of the North Atlantic, and she's in bad shape. Debris is everywhere. The stern section is unrecognisable as anything other than a 15,000-tonne pile of torn metal, and the debris field extends for miles and miles. There's everything there, from intact dinner plates and serving dishes to jars of olives, bottles of champagne with the corks still intact, pieces of luggage carefully packed full of clothes and souvenirs, twisted and bent pipes and shredded deck plating, all of it churned up by the water column and spat out like the vast spread of debris from some giant aeroplane crash from high above. It's haunting, tragic. Every piece tells a story of the ship and the many people who brought it into being, or those who travelled and died aboard it. Since that discovery, one company, RMS Titanic Inc., has maintained the title of Salvor in Possession, allowing them to visit the site and retrieve artefacts for preservation, and most importantly of all, display. Getting to visit their headquarters, where the artefacts are kept and lovingly maintained, has long been a dream of mine, and fortunately this autumn I got my chance and met exactly the person who could tell us all about them.
Hi, I'm Tomasina Ray, President of RMS Titanic Inc. and Director of Collections.
This is the first episode of a new series where we learn about Titanic through the objects that were actually on board. The machinery, all those human touches, everything that made Titanic into a working ship. Today, Tomasina has assembled a special selection of items that tell a tragic story of Titanic's luxury and elegance, now long gone.
So this grouping of artifacts is speaking a little bit more to the luxury of Titanic and the design and the attention to detail that went into making this the ship of dreams.
Titanic was an interesting ship for its time. She'd come after the likes of the German Kronprinzessin Cecilia with her ornate carvings and beautiful artworks, the Mauretania and Lusitania with their towering lounges and dining saloons, and yet still, the new White Star Line ship was considered the most luxurious afloat. It was down to a few things. First, the sheer space aboard Titanic. She was massive inside, 94 feet, nearly 30 metres wide, with deck heights up to 10 or 12 feet. The ship's immense volume, 45,000 gross registered tons, was a third bigger than the largest ships before it. Not only that, but the upper decks were mostly clear, the usual clutter, the countless vent heads and pieces of equipment. A lot of it was cleverly hidden away, and it was housed in the deck houses themselves, giving the ship some wide open deck space for passengers to stretch their legs and enjoy. Of course, it was the quality of the interior decoration that captured the public's imagination. It was restrained in some ways, especially when compared to the ostentatious German liners before it, yet it was of exceptional quality. The artifacts, housed by RMS Titanic Inc., show this in gorgeous, living detail. The Harland & Wolff shipyard employed about 15,000 people in 1912, with the workers split between various disciplines. It was a vast complex, with shops dedicated to just about everything you can imagine needed, making in-house to form, piece by piece, the entirety of a massive Oceanliner. There were workshops dedicated just to making portholes by their hundreds. There were fan workshops, paint workshops, engine and boiler sheds, carpentry shops, and many, many more. Much of that interior luxury of Titanic, its unique beauty, was created in-house by expert craftsmen like woodworkers and cabinet makers.
So the first object here is this 5-arm chandelier that would have been in the first class smoking room. And I really, really love this piece because even though it's mangled and it's been through the trauma of the wreck, it's still beautiful. It still has the gold gilding. It's still, you can still see what it was, but it still has all these signs of being twisted in the sinking. We can see in some of the sockets, some of the glass from the globes that would have covered these light sockets. And in some of the sockets, you can actually even still see the filaments from the light bulbs. So all these little details that survived the sinking are still here and visible, which is amazing.
Electric lighting wasn't new on ships. It had been introduced in the middle of the last century. But the sheer amount of lighting throughout was still amazingly modern. Titanic's lights, like the chandelier seen here, were supplied by two main firms, Perry & Co. and N. Burt & Co., who both specialised in luxurious shipboard light fixtures. The latter had supplied the chandeliers for the Lusitania and Mauretania, among a whole host of other liners. At the time, though, these fixtures were still known as electroliers to distinguish them from candlelit chandeliers, which were actually still around. The light fixtures were sent by Perry and N. Burt & Co. already wired, so that Harland & Wolff's men simply needed to secure them in place and attach them to the main lines.
This is a bronze chandelier, and then it is gilded with this gold leaf, and it just speaks to the luxury and the detail and how ornate everything on the first class part of the ship was. To pay this much attention to detail and have something so beautiful. You can just imagine the people that would have been playing cards or smoking in the room where the chandelier was.
Amazing. Yeah, if artifacts could talk.
The smoking room was decorated like a London club, dark and plush with comfortable leather seats for society's leading magnates and luminaries to sink into dressed in their tails after dinner. This light fixture, as well as the others that hung from the first-class smoking room ceiling, was usually turned out at midnight. But that night it remained on throughout the evacuation. At one point, a group of passengers, including Major Archibald Butt, had gathered around a table, possibly even to play cards, while the ship was sinking. It occurred to me, recounted Archibald Gracie, that these men desired to show their entire indifference to the danger, and that if I advised them as to how seriously I regarded it, they would laugh at me. This was the last I ever saw of any of them. But while the light fixture can speak to Titanic's luxurious fittings, it can also speak volumes of the horrific, violent way the ship was lost.
It's just been like compressed and twisted up. And
Yeah, and to be thrown into the debris field at that point, you can see this arm has been compressed underneath the base, and these all would have been originally out to the sides.
It takes some serious force to bend solid bronze like it was made of plastic. The smoking room sat right under funnel number 4. When Titanic broke apart, the structural integrity of the entire area was seriously compromised. When the stern section began its final plunge, the surging water swept through like a tsunami, and the hydrodynamic forces at play as it dropped to the ocean floor tore off entire chunks of the hull. The exposed smoking room didn't stand a chance. It was completely destroyed, and everything that was once inside of it was strewn out and around for miles.
So it landed in the debris field, but it didn't degrade completely. We've had some others that have been recovered further out from the ship where they don't have any galvanic protection from the hull itself. So those ones degrade much faster and more completely. They're much more, the surface is damaged and almost irreparable at that point, and they're much less stable structurally.
But luxury wasn't just reserved for first class aboard Titanic. Second class got to enjoy some lavish spaces as well. The old cliche had been that second class on the newest generation of liners was as good as first on the older ones, and in Titanic's case, this was actually true. The library and smoking room were luxuriously panelled in polished timber, but the dining room, with its elegantly carved wooden pillars and the enormous portholes, was the star of the show.
This is a wooden chairback from the second class dining room, and there's just faint traces of what would have been decor on the wood here. And even more amazingly, it still has the number of the seat assignment right here. So this is 191.
On boarding the ship, passengers were assigned a seat number that wouldn't change unless specifically requested for the remainder of the voyage. It became tradition that strangers seated at the same tables would become close friends by crossing's end. The wooden chairs themselves were made of carved oak and of a design very common to ocean liners. They swiveled on a metal base that was fixed in place on the deck, meaning that in rough weather they wouldn't slide about. Metal chair bases are all over the wreck side, but what's incredible is that this ornate piece of timber has survived at all.
So this must have fallen between some metal pieces that would have protected it, or near a metal piece that would have protected it, or been surrounded by something that would have protected it. Because to find a piece of wood, especially with this visible decoration still on it, is really amazing.
Have you ever seen another piece like this? I don't think I've seen bits of detritus from the surface that have this kind of detail, but never something that was pulled up from.
Yeah. This is the only piece of wood we have like this, that we found like this.
Wow.
There have been some other remnants of wood still stuck to artifacts that were maybe mounted to something, particularly the tip basins, like little bits of the wooden cabinet that they were mounted in, or the decking if the davit arm had been pulled off. So this is really rare to find, and just the level of detail, as you mentioned, is incredible.
Of course, a key feature of the artifact is that seat number. Still legible after all these years later, a tragic reminder of the human cost of the tragedy. Whoever sat at this chair through the voyage had a slim chance at survival. Roughly 170 of the 284 second-class passengers lost their lives. That's around 58%.
The seat place number looks like ivory.
This is a faux ivory material. So similarly to the rubber, they were looking for new materials that look luxurious, like ivory, but aren't ivory. So this is a material that actually over time is going to continue to yellow like this and discolor. And there's nothing we can really do to stop that. It's just an inherent vice of that piece.
Wow. You just think whose back was up against that chair, really, just eating dinner.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great. That's one of the things about Titanic, is there's so few records of what assignments were on board the ship. It would be really great to be able to assign this to someone, but those records just do not exist.
This next piece is very iconic because these are everywhere, right?
The tile is everywhere. And I think one of the things people don't realize when they think about Titanic is the crazy patterns that we wouldn't necessarily expect to see. So this tile with its inverted color pairing would have been flooring all over the ship.
Flooring on ships is surprisingly important. It needs to provide a firm footing for passengers in rough weather. It needs to be easily cleaned for the inevitable spills that will happen during a storm. For decades, most ships' dining saloons had been floored with timber planking, like up on deck. But around the time of Titanic, some new and emerging materials could fulfill the important practical requirements while seriously upgrading the level of luxury and comfort.
And it just makes this incredibly intricate carpet-like pattern that passengers would have seen and walked over. And it's linoleum. So again, a newer material, something that they're experimenting with and finding so many great uses for, to be able to make something as intricate as this. So similarly to other synthetic materials, it has some inherent bias with the chemical. And so over time, this material shrinks and becomes a little bit more brittle. And because these are molded in separate pieces, the white interior is actually pulling away a little bit from the frame, the red frame. So we always have to monitor and stabilize those pieces in the frame and just make sure they don't come loose.
When we think of luxurious fittings in a grand ocean liner, flooring may not be the first thing that comes to mind, but it was an important part of the ship's interior spaces. Linoleum wasn't just the only kind of tile used either. There was a dazzling array of styles found all over the ship.
So the tiles are something that we can use in all of our exhibitions to tell that part of the story, because there's these linoleum tiles that are very heavily patterned, but there's also the, for instance, the pool tiles and the bathroom tiles, which for a heavier, thick ceramic, because they can withstand the water in that environment that they would need to. There's also many other patterns that are throughout the ship, but this is actually one of the ones that, in terms of linoleum, that we have, because this was in the area of the breakup. A lot of those other linoleum tiles we haven't recovered yet.
Linoleum tiles absolutely covered Titanic's decks. This is one of those facts that probably surprises people the most, because we tend to think of Titanic as the absolute last word in luxury, and we might even assume that marble would have been used in the first-class spaces. But the truth is that materials like marble were far too heavy and expensive to be used liberally throughout, so linoleum presented a much lighter, more economic option.
What's funny about, actually, I just noticed all these pieces is that they're all projecting absolute luxury, but it's gilt bronze, and it's faux ivory, and it's not marble, it's linoleum.
Right.
Does this speak more to, I guess, obviously Harlan will have to build a luxurious ship to a budget? Or is this more like these are innovative materials and it's the age?
I feel like it's more the age. I think that the luxury of being able to have this kind of pattern, this intricate kind of pattern, really trumped anything else. It was really about being able to show something opulent like this pattern and being able to show an opulent, we use ivory to designate your seat number. And gold here, obviously, this was solid gold. This would be quite worth something because picking this up is about 20 pounds. So, they were economical in how they used some of this decoration, but using new and novel materials to create patterns and luxury, I think was right on track for what they were aiming for.
Dinner was an especially important part of life aboard the Oceanliners. In fact, the days seem to revolve entirely around mealtimes. They still do. Many of the recovered artifacts came from the ship's kitchen and the galley spaces, and they would have once served the finest food at sea.
This is a first-class serving dish. It's silver. There are several of these around the debris field, but we can see the White Star Line flag on both sides so that no matter where you're sitting, you can see it. And obviously it's been crushed in the sinking. It's been punctured in the sinking. There's a hole through it. But this is such a beautiful piece, and once treated with electrolysis to remove those damaging chlorides or salts, it just really allowed it to shine, and it preserved the surface and this silver patina.
Each night, white-gloved stewards would set the table for breakfast the next morning. Much of the silverware they polished and carried was created by Elkington from Birmingham, who electroplated a base metal like nickel or copper to create shining, elaborate dishes, bowls, and napkin rings. Those proved to be immensely popular as souvenirs, and they were stolen from ships by their hundreds. It got so bad that shipping companies had to start numbering the things. It was all meticulously polished regularly by the stewards, who had to make sure that the gleaming silver finish matched the elegant beauty of the passenger's dress at dinner time.
So the ongoing preservation of these artifacts, now that they're stable, I'm sure on all four of these you would have unique challenges, because this is now exposed to oxygen.
Yes.
That's a piece of 110-year-old oak that was at the bottom of the ocean. What steps do you take to ensure that each of these individual pieces get what they need? And I mean, that's going to keep shrinking, like what goes into, I guess, monitoring because there's so many different kinds of materials, right?
Yeah, so we are trained in preventative conservation, and so we'll use something like a corrosion intercept bag on something like this, which will just keep it from tarnishing. We'll store it inside these specialty bags, which just prevent any further oxidization so that can have its shine. The metal objects we keep in this room here, where the humidity is at around 40%, so that they are not susceptible to any water combining with the salts and the chlorides, which could cause corrosion. The wood will live in one of our other collection storage rooms where the humidity is a little bit higher and stable. It's about 50% there, and then it'll stay in the same steady temperature as everything else. And the tile actually lives in the same room that the metals do, but we just have to monitor it. And if it requires any treatment from a conservator, then we'll make sure that it sees some attention.
The amount of effort that goes into preserving these important, tangible parts of the Titanic story is difficult to comprehend. As part of its stewardship, RMS Titanic Inc. mounts travelling exhibits, and all the pieces must be carefully kept in climate-controlled containers and monitored very closely. For Tomasina, though, it's a very worthy endeavour.
I think with the artifacts, they're so important to be able to show this array of things together and all of these different aspects that come together for Titanic, because it's not just one thing, it's not just one story. We've been able to talk about so many different topics and different aspects of these artifacts, and it really tells a different part of the story every time. So we want to make sure that the pieces can tell a complete story that allows people to connect with Titanic closer. Being able to see the physical pieces, I can tell you all day about the light bulb that's in this, but for you to be able to come and like peer in and see it yourself, you're going to maybe notice something that I didn't see, or something that's important to you that I didn't point out to you because that's not what I would have noticed. And so for you to be able to look at something and have your own connection to these artifacts is something really profound and something that we hope people enjoy.
Titanic provides us a unique opportunity to examine the recent past in a visceral way. There's been a lot of heated discussion on the recovery of items from the wreck. Many think it should be left alone as a graveside. Others still think it has far more value as an archaeological site instead. I don't really know where I actually sit in that argument. I can see and feel both viewpoints. I have to say, though, that today, in a world where misinformation is flourishing and AI is shaping the way people imagine the past, having access to the actual items that were aboard history's most famous ship feels more important than ever. You can't argue with these objects. They were really there. They're real. They're solid fact.
Our collection is very unique because there's no other collection like it in the world where you have a single source, a single archaeological site, and we have all the pieces together in one place to tell that whole story. So part of our commitment is being able to show all these pieces together and talk about them together and track them together. Because as Salver in Possession and managing the site as an archaeological site, we want to be able to be responsible for all the pieces and have the complete story on them and the provenance on them and share that as well.
This isn't all you'll hear from Tomasina. Together, we've examined a whole host of other amazing things found at the Titanic site, from intimate personal items like clothing and sheet music, to enormous pieces of the machinery that actually powered the ship. Join us next time as we reveal more of Titanic's secrets and stories through the items that were actually there, and we'll explore more of RMS Titanic Inc.'s incredible collection. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we get new videos out weekly. If you want to support my work and get really cool perks like behind the scenes and early access, please visit my Patreon in the link in the description below, or sign up as a YouTube member. Come and join the crew. As always, stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you again next time.